Hi everyone, I am Nathalie. I'm the Partner Marketing Manager at Oneflow. I will be moderating this webinar and I'm very curious myself on this topic. So I'm super excited to have this amazing panel with me today. And as you probably know, this webinar is about attracting and retaining Gen Z, the new generation that has started to entering the market. On paper, this group stands out quite a lot from previous generations. First of all, they were born straight into the digital age, so most of them have had a smartphone and access to all the information in the world since they were very young. Secondly, they're trying to build a career during a pandemic and also a climate crisis. So for a lot of them, their first work experience is probably very different from a lot of us. And here to talk about this today and the trends they've seen and predict the best way to reach the group are these three lovely people. Camilla, you're the CEO and founder of Invise, a marketing agency that helps companies push borders. You also do recruitment marketing as a service. Can you please tell us a bit more about this and yourself?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for bringing me here. I'm super excited to share my knowledge and to learn from the other panelists and maybe from the chat as well. I'm very passionate about more of retaining Gen Z actually. And I think that goes together with attracting Gen Z. And for us as an agency, digital marketing, obviously, we are in need of Gen Z. And to be able to be a digital marketing, delivering top quality, we really need to retain the same people. So this is a big part of our focus. And me as an entrepreneur, I have a really strong drive for building a culture where you get energy. So at the end of the day, when you go home, you're full of energy or you're exhausted, but you're exhausted with a smile on your face, feeling that you've actually contributed. I hope I can share some knowledge here as well.
Amazing, thank you so much. And Leo, you work with people and performance at Hedvig. Your thing is to enable and develop teams, communities, and networks, right? Can you please tell us a bit more about this?
Yeah, definitely. And thank you so much for having me. I firstly just want to joke. I was joking with the panelists before that I am not a Gen Z myself, but why you think that I'm very passionate about the topic? I guess like there's maybe two reasons. Like one of them is that I'm part of Hedvig. Hedvig is an organization that wants to deliver how we experience insurance. And a lot of our target groups are people that are between 20 to 35. So a lot of Gen Zs themselves. And a lot of my workforce, it is people that are 27. That's the average age. So, a lot of what I do every day, it is to, just as Camilla said, thinking of how do we grow them. But as a talent partner right now, I do a lot of thinking how to attract them, how to select them and engage them to know why they should work for us. So I'm excited to share a lot of my thoughts with you guys. And please feel free to challenge us in the chat. I love to get you guys ongoing on this.
Yes, definitely. If you guys have any questions or if you want to just get involved, please do that. But yeah, thank you, Leo. You also wrote a really interesting blog post on this topic that I read the other week. And if you guys haven't read it, I will include it in the follow-up email definitely afterwards. It was really interesting and fun reading. But last but not least, my former colleague at Teamtailor, Fredrik. I was saying before this, it's really nice to have you on board because I'm a little nervous, but we have done this together a lot of times before, so it's really nice to have you here. You're also like HR and recruitment genius. You're like the Wikipedia that knows everything about this topic. So I'm really interested to hear what you have to say because you're also the only Gen Z in the panel. Mm-hmm. So yeah, maybe you can give us some inside information and just share your knowledge about this.
I'll try.
Tell us a bit more about yourself first.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you gave me too much hubris with calling me an HR tech genius and that kind of stuff. I don't think that's good for my health. I think it's good to keep it down on earth a bit. No, but it's really fun to be here because I've done quite a few webinars over the years. I work as the head of partnerships at Teamtailor. Teamtailor is a recruitment software and all-in-one software in general. So our goal is to be able to help a company from start to finish with recruitment as a software to help them manage everything. And being one of these dreadful Gen Z myself, born at the end of 1996, I both see the first-hand perspective for my own self, but also some of my close friends and some of my like not as close friends are definitely a part of the Gen Z and the really demanding part of the Gen Z. Plus all these webinars and speaking to so many HR people, so many different people within the industry over the years, I think it gives me a pretty nice perspective on this like future disruption or what's to come.
Thank you. And thank you guys for joining me today. And thanks everyone who's joined in the audience. Super excited to see that everyone's in the chat and saying hello. But yeah, we can just start by kicking off with like, what are the biggest trends you see right now, and how, like, yeah, how do you deal with this new generation coming? I know that there's no like one size fits all technique, but if you guys can share a bit of your insights, that would be really cool.
I think we spoke about this briefly when we had our dry run. I think one of the first things you probably need to speak about is that the fact that there's no hard cutoff, that the fact that you're born at the break point of the Gen Z versus millennials, I don't think that it's a hard break point. Just because you're born in 96 versus 94 doesn't mean you're all of a sudden you have the same mentalities. I think someone who's born in the early stages of the 90s, so they're a late millennial and an early millennial, they will probably have very different ideas of what the workplace will be like. So even though now the Gen Z generation is actually coming into market, we've already seen the same kind of behaviors from the younger people in the millennial generation, the same kind of behaviors and that kind of stuff. I think that's a good idea to start off. And I know that, Leo, you have quite a lot of topics on the subject. Or thoughts on the subject, rather.
Yeah, that's very early on the webinar for us to talk about that, right? But it's I kind of like Fredrik's perspective. Yeah, like, do you know, when we were discussing like what makes a Gen Z and what makes a millennial and the difference between us and so on, and I kind of agree with Fredrik, like maybe it's not that we're that different. Maybe there's a couple of things with accessibility, right? So like, I was born in '89. I remember the first job that I've applied for, I don't know how many years ago, but that was quite different than the way that people apply for jobs now. And a lot because right now people use a lot more of digital tools, right? So like a lot of the younger generations or the Gen Zs, are they used to known to, you know, identify themselves and create content online or be part of different forums and just kind of create different ways of engaging with people around the world, right? So there's all of this perspective of like, how do we get into the digitalization, into how do we attract people, and then how do we assess, and how do we make sure they have a great experience while being a candidate? And then after they started your job, like, is really the tools that we are using at work very connected to what's happening outside work, right? Like if people are so used to using TikTok, why are we still using, I'm not gonna name any particular tool right now, that are quite old. Like those kind of conversations, I think, are the kind of interesting conversations for us to begin in a more practical way.
Yeah. Do you think it's risky to differentiate the generations too much? Like if we adapt too much to this generation, will it be too technical for the older people that are actually still in? Like, I understand that we can adapt as people as well, but if it goes too, do you think it's moving too fast?
Yeah, like I'll just go first. I was, I would say like yes and no, you know, like there's something with the fact of like, of course, different age groups, they have maybe different behaviors per se, but at the same time, like to me, the importance of what Gen Zs are doing right now is a lot of the things that all of the other generations wanted as well. So it's like, if we believe that one of the current trends is for people to have a purposeful job description that they know what they're contributing to the world, or they know how they can grow their careers there, or, you know, how they can have flexibility and not to get bored at work. That's the same thing for me that was born maybe 10 years younger than them. So I don't know if it's a generational thing per se.
No, I totally agree. I think the drive and what we all get inspired and motivated and feel great about ourselves is the same. I think the Gen Z is just better to, or has an easier way of expressing that really early on and actually demanding more from you as a company, which is good in a way, because if it pushes the company and you as an employer to push how you actually develop people, but you need to adapt that to millennials as well and everybody else at the workforce. So I totally agree on that. I think they're just better at expressing it early on and demanding it from us. Otherwise they won't work for us or go somewhere else.
Following on Camilla's like topics there, I think as long as you try to be the best possible employer and try to be the best, you give the best possible experience overall, you don't have to differentiates. I think the biggest difference between us Gen Zs and the rest is how we've grown up with the accessibility of information. We've grown up with it. We're the TikTok generation, so we know that if we're bored, we just scroll to the next thing. We just scroll to the next thing, and it's long been spoken about that we shift jobs way more frequently. So which means if we're not getting our fulfillment, we will just look for something else, because we know that there's a lot else. We follow our friends on Instagram, on TikTok, on Snapchat, and we can see that they're having fun at their job and I'm not having fun at my job. And the impatience is something you need to work with in a different way. And as long as you're a good employer, actually seeing your employees, developing your employees, that won't be the same of an issue. But the Gen Z, they will take the first leap of faith earlier, I think, than some of the generations, because we're not as patient, because we know that there's always grass on the other side to some extent. But as long as you continue working on developing your employees, it won't be the same amount of problem.
Yeah, I think one more thing they're expecting is like authenticity, because everything is so transparent today. So they expect, and I think that's for all generations, everybody wants honesty and wants to really know how is a company working at. Like, I think one thing we've seen is really telling everybody, like, this is the good things with Invise, but we do have challenges as a company, and actually being honest with them is something that's really appreciated, because they want to be and they want to be a part of developing something. And if you see that, like, these are the challenges we want to get here, but we have a couple of steps we need to take, but you can help us on that journey. I think that gets a lot of people motivated, and that goes for all genders, I would say, or all different. Yeah, thanks.
Just because the Gen said, like, know their worth a bit more, like, are better to express it, and better to express what they want and demand things. Do we, like, is it dangerous to, like, rub their ego or whatever you say, or is it like it's just the times that we're in right now?
But I think challenging back, and when you get somebody to become a little bit irritated because you ask one of those tough questions, but the person you're asking the question to realizes this is pushing me to grow as a human being as well. When you get that kind of discussion, I think you're really in a good place. Just agreeing with everything doesn't make for a long-term relationship, I would say.
Yeah, and I mean, coming to Camilla's points as well, like, there's something with the fact of sort of like engaging the Gen Zs into understanding the value of the previous generations, right? Or like the value of how we used to run marketing, or how we used to do product, or how we used to do technology, and sort of like, I think, like, the diversity of perspectives, it's what it matters in the end of the day. That I think that, you know, a Gen Z right now maybe know what's better according to them based on what they have experienced, but at the same time, they haven't done it themselves so much, right? So there's a lot of like, how do we spark the curiosity on them of like, maybe we have done things in a different way in the past, maybe some of them did work, some of them didn't, but like, it's good for you just to know the history, like why things are not working so well, or how much has the change been happening and stuff like that.
Is it hard to, like, leverage 3 generations at the same time, working with talent management, for example, you, Leo?
Yeah, you know, like my workforce is quite homogeneous into the Gen Zs, I would, and the millennials. But I think from my previous experience, yes. So, and like, there's a lot around communication, right? So it's like understanding that the way that we communicate, it's adapting messages are different, right? So if I have a 25 years experience, and the way that I probably should receive information, or like how to get engaged into my strategy or into the way I should be here, is probably different from someone who's been here just for a couple of months, right? So I think there's a lot of like adapting messages, and then a lot of like making sure that you're getting to know people for who they are, right? So it's not just because you're 55 or you're 19 that makes you who you are, but truly, like, there's a lot of things around making sure of like, why do you want to work there? What do you want to do with your career? Like, what gets you excited? Like, what do you want to develop? That I think that even if you're 55, if you're 19, are good conversations that we should all have with our employees.
Yeah, the core fundamentals, I think, are pretty much the same either way. If you're talking to a baby boomer or a Gen Z, like, they're all human beings. All human beings want to be treated equally. Some people will just value things a bit higher than others. And in retrospective, there are studies done by major recruiting companies about what's important at an employer. And in general, it's the same top 10, but they just shift ranking typically. So all the same values still apply. So you just need to make sure that you still apply those kind of things. So, and a modern day, like, talent organization needs to be agile, because they need to be able to adapt, because there will always be changes. Just look at the last 2 years, we've had to evolve how we treat our employees. Now that people are remote, people are hybrid, people are from being at the office. And I think if you have the agile approach, you are transparent and you communicate. I think it shouldn't be an issue to manage them to the same extent, because they're all human beings, which is what you have to consider. It's not that Gen Z is an alien race that just is coming here to disrupt everything. It's human beings, but they just know to some extent. But I see that there's a lot of good questions coming in the chat as well, which is nice.
Yeah. We had Camilla, you were talking about challenging back, and there's one person here, Gabrielle, that's asking if you can give a few examples of that.
Good question. I was in a meeting, I think it was yesterday or the day before, with a fantastic guy that we want to bring into sales at Invise. Maybe he's here, and he has like all the right qualities, and his approach, like he's got offers from so many different companies, and his approach was like, if we're even going to talk about this, I want ownership, I want this, I want this, I want this. And if you agree on that, we can have a chat. And I just wrote him a long email back about like, you got to walk the walk and not just talk the talk. And this is how Invise has been growing. And this is like, I was really pushing him and challenging him. Like, we're a 50 people company now. We're going to grow to 200 quite quickly. These are the perks that you're going to get on the way. Like, as a human being, not with a payroll or ownership and that kind of stuff. And I didn't know if it was going to be right or wrong. I was like, either he's going to leave or he's going to come back. And he's so much more interested now. So I just pushed him back and didn't go for that. And if I would have done a middle way, I think it would have gone somewhere else. So that's a way of just challenging in that kind of way. Or if somebody, I think just pushing back and challenging and that getting that kind of like discussion and honesty. I think really you need to be honest in those kind of discussions. Otherwise, it's not going to go good. So that's the way of challenging back. So we haven't decided to work together, but I think the discussion is really better after that.
But in that regard, it's just about you seeing him, hearing him, and actually making sure that he's seen and heard as well. Plus, you give him a clear step of this, what's happens. From my own opinion, based on my own like what I'm like, and also what some of my friends are, and the research I've done, like Gen Z, typically we get work quite easily, but we also want to evolve. Like, there's never been as much access for information to be successful. To be like, if you look at studies, everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. Everybody wants to be successful. If you go on TikTok and Instagram and whatever, there's like quick guides or how you personally develop yourself. And a large part of that, look at like some surveys, is that people want to develop, people want to become better at it, and people want to take it, like, we were impatient, we want to be CEO in 10 years. So the way you can keep your path, this is what you need to do forward. I think if you want to retain Gen Z, you need to keep them moving forward at all times to some extent. You can't just have them pedaling water. You need to always give them somewhere to move forward. It doesn't have to be huge leaps. Like, you'll go from the small sales executive to the CEO in a year, but like, do something that allows you to evolve and become like the evolving role. I think that's one of the biggest things for a board generation. So they always have something new to bite into to some extent, at least from my perspective.
Yeah. No, yeah, I just want to chip in and kind of come back to what also Camilla has said before. Like, there's something with authenticity and clarity, right? So it's like, we don't want to bullshit anymore. Like, we want people to be able to tell us, like, there's a lot of challenges here, and maybe this is the way that we want to grow people. This is the way that people, they get new challenges. But, you know, like, I think like having that clarity, it's what makes the Gen Z so important to us compared to maybe our generation that was a bit scared of speaking up and asking for those things. When coming to Fredrik's point right now, because there's so many new jobs and new ways of creating your own career, like, why would you work for that company, right? So like, I guess a lot of things that organizations should do is to try to answer themselves the questions like, how do I grow my people? Like, what are my current challenges right now? Like, where am I really going? Like, what kind of skills do I really want from a job description, instead of just creating requirements and doing the old ways of doing stuff.
And I think I'm following up on that, challenging and involving both as a human being, as a person, and in your career. I think those two are really important to align.
There's so many questions coming in here. Speaking of not getting them bored, like, how can you adapt the physical workplace for Gen Z to like keep them encouraged to come into the office as well and like work on the culture? How is that like working with Gen Z?
I think like for us, we're moving office right now. I think I'm the only one here. We're moving office right now at Hedvig, and a lot what we've done was to actually ask them, right? So to actually deliver something based on what people want. So of course, parts of the people and performance team had ideas of like, where should we go and what was the budget to get there. But I think a lot of the secret for us was to truly find like a lot of spaces to collect input from people of like, what do they want from the office? Like, what is that flexibility that they're looking for? And then we end up finding a space that it's pretty, there's a lot of space for people to connect. So like we're pretty hybrid. So people go to the office if they want to. So if they are in the office, it's a space for them to co-create something, for them to have fun and have a beer after work, for them to get to know their new colleagues that are just starting over, or to go for like a business lunch if that's the case. So the office for us, and I would love to hear the other panelists' perspective, but it's basically a space to meet. So like if you want to do focus work, I've seen a lot of people prefer to do that somewhere else, not with like a lot of other people around them. But please challenge me.
But I think the office still will play quite a lot of large role in Gen Z for quite a while, because what you have to take into consideration is Gen Z is quite young. They don't have, some of them still have roommates, some of them still live at home, which means the office is the place where they retreat to work, which means some of them at Gen Z, based on a lot of conversations, it's easy to work remotely when you have a spare office at home. But if you're living in one of the major cities like Stockholm, London, New York, whatever, prices are crazy, which means like Gen Z won't be able to afford another bedroom just to have a home office, which means they're going to be sitting somewhere else, which means they need to be able to work at the office as well. So I think the office might play a pretty big role for some Gen Z, because that's where they're able to escape. So they don't, because they can't work properly at home based of experience. I also think, adding to Leo's point, that the office is like the community hub. That's where you go to meet people, to bond, and you should be able to find a balance with both. But I think if you can listen into your say what they want, that's going to give you the idea, because every company is different, personality traits are different. Some people all want to work from home, then you just need to make sure that the office is a fun place to hang out. Well, some people will need to go there because they need to work and efficiently work to some extent.
Yeah, I'm sorry to disappoint you both, but I won't challenge you on what you're saying, because I totally agree. And we're on the same, we're moving offices as well, and we've done exactly the same. I think one big part and one important part is also, if you are a company hybrid, that some people work from the office and some people work from home, you really need to work on the culture, not only at the office, but not like what is the whole culture for the company, so you don't forget all the people working from home that are maybe home 4 days a week or even 5 days a week, so you still get that culture going for the whole company. And I think that's been a big challenge. In the first part of the pandemic, we were like, okay, so we can't work on our culture because it's COVID, and then we just shift that mindset. So instead we started thinking, okay, so how can we really prove that our culture is so strong due to COVID? So you really need to shift that way of working with your culture and make it not only office, but for the whole company, and adapt it to the people working at home as well.
Like for me, when I discuss around culture, it's quite of a simple thing on discussing of like, do we create spaces for people to connect, right? Like, do we have rooms and opportunities that people can get to know themselves better, so they can challenge themselves, so they can create stuff together. So like culture for me, it's a lot about quality of relationships. And of course, maybe doing that online for a bit of us, it's a bit more weird or a bit different than for some others. But at the same time, that is a mandatory thing for the generation that is born digitally, right? So it is a set of skill that us as millennial leaders have to strive for, and make sure that we keep innovating the ways that people are interacting and connecting.
This generation and the youngest millennials, a lot of them have grown up by having incredible cultures online. Like they've grown up playing games and doing other stuff where they've had incredible cultures with people that they've never met, never spoken to, just because they have good relationships. So it's definitely possible, and people are used to having digital relationships and really good culture. So it's not something that you should be afraid of, because this generation especially knows and have experience with it, even though they don't know that they have experience with having great cultures.
Can you guys give any examples of what you can do, like hands-on examples to like encourage people and to work on the culture when you're working virtually? Because you also want to get the older generations involved in that as well. So is that like a challenge, or could you give some hands-on tips?
That's a hard question. We've tried like the whole virtual after work thing. Hasn't really worked for us in larger groups because everybody are muted, and when you're going to say something, like somebody does a joke, like you're going to unmute it, the timing is off and everything like that. So we've tried to work on if you're sitting working, like you're working at your computer, you just have like we do Google Hangouts, you have that open, so you can actually, it's like you're sitting working together, but you're really not speaking, you just have it on, you're unmuted, and you can just have a chat. That's something we tried. With this Monday, we tried doing breath work, so it's coaching on how you can use your breath for getting less stress or higher performance, etc. We did that. Everyone were online. It was quite powerful actually, because everybody did unmute and you could get that feeling still of us doing it together, but we were online. So those are some easy examples to try.
Yeah, and I think like there's maybe like two behaviors that I usually talk about when I talk about online culture, like something around transparency and something around collaboration, right? So it's like whenever we have some news of someone coming or someone leaving, or some updates from a marketing perspective, or some updates from product or whatever it's going on, it's quite important that leaders understand that it's their responsibility, like on the spot, to share that information. So people, they feel like the ownership and the empowerment of like, oh, I know what's happening, so they don't have to wait maybe for an all hands or a monthly report or whatnot. And then the collaboration perspective of making sure that we are investing in collaborative tools, right? So that people can work together. So it's, I don't want to mention names right now, but there's loads of different tools that we can work on, and making sure that people are setting up plans together, you know, collecting input and feedback on stuff. And at the same time, if you use a very famous message platform that maybe a lot of us use, you can also create new channels that get people together, right? So you could just go ahead and create a weekend channel that people can share what they want to do in the weekends, or if they're very passionate about a certain type of culture or food, or, you know, like offline stuff that you would do it in the office if you're grabbing a coffee with someone, right? They can get people together so they can like, oh, I can go there and associate to connect myself with those folks about those topics and so on.
And lastly, I think management and leadership or leadership in general, like has to take a huge responsibility when it comes to the culture. You are the ones who are pushing the culture in these scenarios. Like when you have meetings with your teams, and especially the upper management team, like it's about delivering the energy that you want the company to have. So you need to have good energy. Like you need to make sure that you push yourself, even though you're tired, whatever, you need to make sure that you bring the energy that you want the team to have. You need to allow for collaboration, for people to talk beyond it. I realized that myself. Like when you're at the office, you can speak to someone at the coffee meet just for 5 minutes without it, but you need to allow that kind of stuff to open up. Like Slack, that kind of group, so you can have like a Slack group for interesting stuff like gaming, Formula 1, whatever it is that the people in your company has, so you can actually communicate around that kind of topic as well. I think it's really good, and I like there's so many different ways you can try it out. And what we've seen works is like smaller groups, and not just like what company to company. It's like smaller groups, like this team, you guys bond with each other, or you put these guys to do something together. Because 6 people, it's easier for them to have a conversation than 600 people, because then nobody will even get a single word out.
Totally agree. I can just add one thing that I've seen been working really well as well is video content. Like instead of sending an email from management team or from somebody to somebody else, just record yourself walking, or because you get that energy that you don't get at the office every day. So just doing delivering a message through video instead of writing an email is an easy way of getting that energy out, because I totally agree on that, Fredrik. It's so important.
Is there a difference if you live in the countryside, like in a small town, or in the city, like a large city? Do you guys think that there's a big difference from the wants and needs?
But like typically, if you live in a small city in the countryside versus the big city, there's so much other stuff you can do in the big city versus. And I think it is different, but it's not drastically different. And of course, it will rely on the personality traits, or what kind of people you're hiring. If it's developers, if it's salespeople, if it's marketing people, of course, that always takes it into consideration as well. But it's a small difference, at least from my own experience.
Yeah, because I'm thinking like the boredness perspective of things, right? Because if you live in a smaller place, there's less jobs. So at the same time, if you're a Gen Z and you're like scrolling around all of your social media and kind of like, oh, maybe I could be doing this and that, for a practicality perspective, I have to maybe move out to the bigger city, or I have to be in a place that accepts like fully remote work, right? Which is, I guess, one of the biggest trends. But I'm quite curious on like the perspective of what do people expect from work, or like how can they have fun then at work? Like, isn't that maybe then our responsibility that if you are in a smaller place per se, you have to make sure that you keep entertaining your folks, you know, like as a perspective of like getting them more and more engaged into how to run social activities.
But I think really think it takes into consideration what kind of job, what kind of city, of course. If it's a smaller city or if it's a small city, I think that takes into consideration also the people you're hiring, like what kind of like if it's a person who has small kids, for example, they will probably value being remote so they can spend more time with their family. Or if they have a hobby that they really love, hiking, they will probably enjoy being more remote than being into the office. Of course, there's a lot of things in consideration, but in my own experience, people in the city aren't as like there's always more things you can do in terms of awareness. There's always the next thing. There's always something new. There's always something new. Plus, there's always the issue with housing, which means people need to escape their own small sort of apartments to get into the office. So I think that also takes into consideration.
I wanted to ask a question related to your blog, Leo, because I thought it was really interesting. You wrote about BYOL. Is it? Yeah. Like bring your own learnings. And I think it was really like interesting that you were talking about like this generation, and maybe like millennials as well, but especially this generation knows so much from, I don't know, TikTok, or from having selling stuff online and stuff. Can you do you think a formal education matter as much, or is that like how valuable are these skills?
Yeah, that's a good hot topic, right? Maybe a lot of people have different opinions, but yeah, I mean, for sure. Do you know, like, I mean, we are living in a world that people can learn stuff on YouTube so fast all the time, right? So it's fairly naive for us to still believe that a 4-year education or a 5-year education program it's needed for people to be a high performing, right? Like, I think that's right now we're definitely looking for people that can adapt. We're definitely looking for people that can be innovative, that can be up to speed on what's happening in the world, right? So that means that maybe a formal education is not the primary requirement. And of course, that depends on the kind of role that you're looking for, right? It's like maybe a lawyer, because of legal regulations, they need to have a lawyer degree, right? But maybe if you do digital marketing or partnership, as some of you here, maybe that's not so needed. Maybe that's way more on certain types of soft skills or core skills, as I call them, and elements on like making sure that they keep up to date into how do they learn. So no, I don't think like years of experience matter that much when I'm looking for a new hire. And I don't think that formal education matters that much. But what do you guys think?
Yeah, what do you guys think?
I would also say it depends on what kind of job it is. As you said, like lawyer or doctor, yeah, I would appreciate maybe to go to a doctor that actually has a degree. But for us, like if we have marketing automation specialists, for example, and if you do a 2-year marketing automation training and you go to Invise, you learn more in like 2 weeks than you do at 2 years at an education, because everything is going so quickly. So it's really hard for the schools to adapt to that kind of speed. We have developers that's been coding since they were born, basically, that has learned so much more than somebody that comes with an education. So for us, a formal education on most roles doesn't matter for us. It's more of a mindset, the skills you have. Previous years of experience could matter if we're looking for somebody senior, because you need to be able to cope with some situations and have been into different situations before. But for us, formal education, no, it's not very important for us. But we are a digital agency, so for us it's easy to say no. For other companies, it's maybe more important.
Yeah, some roles, of course, you're required to have it. I think now in this learning age we live in now, every kind of information, you can learn anything online whenever you're doing something, like based of experience. Again, some of my friends have just finished their 4-year studies and started their work there for first year and for 6 months in the real life. And they're like, okay, so I used 5% of what I learned during my 4-year studies. The rest of it I learned in my job. But it's good because that was some of the things that we'll rely back on. But I think it's always about how you assess the skills required for the job. That's the essential that you need to look at. Okay, how do I assess what skills are important for this role, and how do I meet them? If a person who doesn't have experience but has learned himself, has better experience than someone who's studied, then you should go with the one who has the better skills to some extent. And I think that also comes with years of experience, because I think that's also a common pitfall. Like, you've worked 10 years, which means you probably know this. You can also have someone who's worked 2 years, but has actually done this because he's worked in a higher tempo environment, or he had this on his plate. So it's about assessing the skills and assessing the kind of person you're meeting for and that requires you to actually know what you're looking for, and you've done your homework before.
Yeah, and also look for the kind of people that are still interested in learning, still interested in adapting and seeing what kind of new challenges are out there. I think we're really looking for that, people that are still interested and curious.
Yeah, and I guess like it requires us to be open-minded about it, right? So I think maybe like 5 or 10 years ago, we will look at like content creators or influencers, like people that are working by themselves online, as people that are slacking, right? Like it would be something weird compared to us as our generation. Not a lot of us have done this before. At the same time, look at what's happening for them, right? Like a lot of them have been great entrepreneurs, great people learning about business and marketing, great with communicating themselves, or great at like adapting and having a drive of creating something meaningful. So I think that a lot of those competencies are quite important for people that want to keep being relevant into new ways of engaging new generations, right?
Yeah, I also read a study somewhere, just a big side note, that 50% of people who have a university degree don't work with what they actually studied.
I read that one as well.
Which means like that tells you somewhat extent of how important it is. That 50% of the people just, of course, there's always valuable learnings from doing it, but if it turns it's about assessing the skills required for the job. That's the essential, and the personality trait that you need in order for them to continue evolving in the role.
But do you think that there should be new ways then, instead of like the traditional CV? Should we just go to do like testing, or like how do you hire these people?
I think that's a really interesting question, and I think Fredrik, maybe this is yours, considering what you're doing. But I would definitely say new ways, and it depends on what kind of job it is, I would say, and depend on, like, finding a developer is so hard, but if you throw out a challenge to a developer, they will accept it straight away, and maybe that's a better way of trying to attract them, instead of saying, hey, send your CV and write a personal letter to us. They won't do that, but if we send them a challenge, maybe they'll go for that. So I think it depends on jobs, but definitely new ways than CV.
I think the cover letter is on its last breath already. I think the CV, based on the conversation, is on its last leg. I think it's good to know to some extent, but I think it doesn't tell you anything about the person's skills, about what they can actually do. I think, of course, it's different for every single role. I think assessments are great in some roles. I think there's different things you can do for certain roles, but you probably need to do your homework before you publish your role. Okay, what am I actually looking for in this role? And then based on that, you'll make the choice. Okay, so am I doing a challenge? Am I doing an assessment? Am I asking video questions? Because that's what I want them to be able to speak and fend for themselves. Like, depends on how you can do it. That's the important thing. But you need to first look at, okay, what skills and personality traits am I looking for? And then start from there. And then you can start assessing, and don't go with everything, like assessment for everything, or CV for everything, or this for everything as well. Of course, I think there's values in having some of those at all times, but it's about adjusting for the kind of personality trait you're looking for. Sometimes video is the way to go. It might not be for a developer, but it might be for a customer service agent that is going to stand in, or the receptionist. So you know that this person can actually talk and be nice, that kind of stuff.
I think there's something with like engaging the whole organization into like, how do we bring other people in, right? Coming to what Fredrik said as well. So it's, instead of us like just pushing for like this typical stiff framework of like, this is step 1, step 2, step 3, like truly asking people like what would they believe would be the best way to assess. And then like, I like to give opportunities that are hands-on as well, right? So if it's people to like come out with a case, or to a bunch of rounds of interviews, or I usually call them chats. So I usually don't even give people like concrete questions what to ask, and just let things flow. And then that's kind of creates like enough data or information for us to have an assessment on, okay, do we think that this is the right person that can challenge us, or do they have the right set of competence and skills to be the best on their job? So I think it's just a mix of a bunch of different types of things. And that's quite important for people that are working with people, like a lot of us, I guess, to keep up to date into the newest trends and whatnot.
I had a challenge to you guys around this kind of from Fredrik. If you want to attract and hire digital skilled talents and have a low employer branding awareness, what shall you do? And don't say the same thing as everyone else. EVP, culture, etc. It's just mobile-based career page, etc. Sorry to slay your question. It's just commodity today. That's the challenge for you.
Start from within. Great talent attract great talent is probably the best thing you need to start off as the fundamentals. That's where you need to start off. Like if you have great people already, they will be able to attract great people. Of course, you need to get yourself out there. You can't. In Sweden, we have say like you can't paint the pig. There's another saying in English. I don't know the exact translation, but you can't you can't cover like if you have a bad culture, you need to work on the culture, because a great culture will attract great people. And of course, like don't be afraid to go into what actually that makes you stand out. I'd say is also a good thing. If you, I think I've said this in so many webinars, so if you've seen multiple webinars with me, you've probably heard this before, but you can't put like lipsticks on a pig. Thank you, Gabrielle. If you have a nerdy culture, for example, embrace that and make that your thing, because if that's the kind of people you want to attract, embrace the nerdy culture. If you have a sporty culture, embrace that, because you can't compete with Apple and Facebook and whatnot. But if you find what makes you unique, your small edge, use your people and start working with like transparency, use the people around you and double down on culture and what makes you unique. I'd say that's the best thing. And from there, you can start evolving and setting a structure for how you communicate, how you reach people, where you reach people. Because if you have that narrowed down, then it's easier for you to find, okay, now I know this is the culture, this is the people, this is what we want. Then I know which channels I want to look at. There's no point of me advertising in Facebook if I'm looking for XYZ potential. That's my input.
Yeah, like I think that there's also something with like starting small, right? So like we need to invest into employer brands or into creating outreach or like in creating talent attraction and awareness, right? So like you don't need to maybe start on having a career site that is flashy. Maybe you just need to start with something that get people excited about. And then like whenever I think about digital talents and so on, there's also something like, what does that mean? Like, do we want to attract developers first, and like where are they? Like how can we go and reach out to them and sort of like invite them in? It could be an interesting part as well, like invite them in for them to experience your culture, like invite them into your recruitment process, that they can have lunch with other developers so they can talk to people about it. So you don't have to invest so much into the channels and the content, but yes, into the relationship, coming to what Fredrik said as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think you're both saying good points. I think starting within and doing different kind of like having a hackathon or having a lunch is great. But in some way you need, even though I know you don't want to do employer branding and all that kind of stuff, you do need to get out there in a way. I mean, the people that you're trying to reach, they need to see your brand in some way. And maybe that's ambassadors from within, or inviting to an event, or maybe just a webinar, but in some way you need to be able to reach them or find out where are they chatting. But I think Fredrik is on a really good point as well, just finding your niche, because there's so many great companies that have great cultures that are great to work at. So find what you're good at and really stick with that. I think it's a good point.
Yeah, but to like simplify it, you need to break it down in 3 simple steps. Okay, we need to reach them. Where do we reach them? We need to attract them. How do we attract them? We need to convert them. How do we convert them? And like start breaking it down simply. That's the easiest way you can do it. Like, because if you know where they are.
Them? Like, yeah, exactly. They don't want to have the job today. Maybe you can nurture them so they want to have the job in a year. Sorry for interrupting you. I just got excited.
Yeah, and Camilla, you said as well, like have some ambassadors in the company. You guys work a lot with like referrals and stuff. Is that valuable to you when you hire?
Yeah, for sure.
Because that's a really good thing, like maybe to reach good people, because you trust your people.
Yeah, you trust your people, and I mean they're part of your journey and they want to be part of this fantastic trip you're on, so they wouldn't recommend somebody that wouldn't be a great part of that. Obviously sometimes it goes wrong, but their mindset is always bringing the right people because they're going to work with them. It's going to be part of their family as well. So I think ambassadors from within, even people that maybe didn't fit into your company that has left or something like that, them recommending other people to start at your agency or at your company is fantastic, because they will get the honest opinion. This is the great stuff. This is the bad stuff. And if they still excited and they still want to be part of the journey, it's a perfect match. So yeah, ambassadors is the best, I would say.
Can I challenge you?
Yeah, please do, please.
No, I was just thinking the diversity perspective of this, you know. So it's like, I do think that referrals and the whole ambassadorship, it's a great strategy to creating awareness. And I think that like probably like 40% of our current roles, they do come from someone that knew someone. But at the same time, like I'm one of the ones to like keep making sure that we are putting effort into positioning ourselves into bringing people that look and sound different than us, right? So it's, I have a strong opinion about referrals, and like whenever I do, and I love when people get engaged of like, I want to help out in the recruitment process. I love for them to tell me why, and the way that I want to assess that person, it will be a bit different than the other ones. But at the same time, I just also want to ask my workforce, like, what can I do to attract different types of people that we don't have right now that we need it, if that makes sense. So I think it's like the balance of both and not just relying into one. Maybe that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you on that. And I think it's an interesting wording that you hear a lot, like this person will fit in perfectly with our culture. Maybe that's, you want somebody that actually, I want somebody that can challenge our culture, but still be part of the journey you're on.
Culture fit or culture add. You want people to add and continue developing it. That's how you continue making the company evolve as well. And that only comes from some somewhat diversity as well. Because if everybody's the same, then you will have the Wolf of Wall Street culture eventually. But you want people to actually challenge and embrace the people. You want that challenge. And
I mean, diversity and inclusion is like more popular is the wrong word, but like it's more important than ever, especially like to this generation as well. And I think like from reading about this generation, and obviously us as well, and millennials, and all of us care about it, but it's really important for this generation, I feel. And a lot of people wouldn't even apply for a job if they didn't feel that their company had that. Have you experienced that, or how do you work with that, like to make sure that
I have a couple of candidates that ask me like concrete questions of like, how many women do I have in leadership, or like representation questions, right? It's like how can I feel safe? Like, what are you doing about it if you want to change, and so on. And I think that there is a strong connection with like how the Gen Zs, they relate with their identities, which is maybe a little bit different than the way that we millennials handle identities, but it's just an important point for us to acknowledge. I think like all of us around the world still have a long way to get better at it. It's just a matter of us bringing it up of what does diversity means to us, like what is inclusion and belonging means to us, and what are we doing to invest about it, right? So like, what are we doing from getting from X to Y? The awareness has been definitely been rising all across the world. It's on a lot of people's agendas, and you can't just narrow it down to male versus female, ethnicity versus non-ethnicity. You have to think of the bigger picture when it comes to everything. Also, like in the generational talk we have right now, a company will work best if you have some older, some medium old, and some young people as well. That's how you get the best operational teams, when you have a mix of everything. And that's like, it's a challenge, but you need to really know that you actually look at certain skills of certain people. But there's also the I know that I've had this question asked to me as well, but like, how much should you weigh diversity versus inclusion? Like, should you always just look at the person who scores the highest in the skill that you're looking for, or should you weigh that this person has 75% of the skills we're looking for, but they will help us meet our diversity quotas? And what's the like underlying benefits that we can't see based on that skill as well? Because if this person is 100% fit on skill, and this person is 80% fit on skill, but also adds other benefits in terms of culture or the different diversity, this 80% person skill could also have different sides that brings the entire company up to 110%. But it's a very different, like, challenging one. And I think I don't have a clear answer. I mean, like, I usually talk about hiring for potential. So like, I would always go for having more diversity. like in general. But of course, that also depends on like where we are as a business and the kind of organization that I am, right? So like I do feel like that has to come from the business. So like the business has to believe in that we need to become more diverse, because the business will grow from that. So that's where like just you first start, and then from there, yeah, sometimes you have to make those kind of investments or giving the opportunities so people they can shine, right? Which a lot of people that are underprivileged, they're not given. So it's just yeah, it's an ongoing discussion. I don't have the right answer either, Fredrik, but it's I would always still fight for the underdogs, but it's because I believe in the importance of that, and my business believes in that as well.
Yeah. And I agree, and I think that's a really interesting point with the like 100% skill set or 70%, but something else actually adds on. So the total is better if you choose another person. I don't have an answer either, but I think it's an interesting perspective, and I think it is something that we should adapt to as companies and really look at when we are hiring to get that diversity, because it's also easy to attract the same kind of people all the time, but you don't get those frictions that is actually really, really important for you to grow as a company. So
yeah.
I have two people asking quite similar questions that I think was really interesting. And they are asking you guys, like from a company standpoint, hiring people that are looking for the next best step. Sorry, it's a long question. If they have the mentality to like skip on to the next if they're bored, how do you deal with that?
So I think that's just a reality, like, and not just because of a Gen Z situation, because of economical situation that's right now, a lot of people are just rethinking what do they really want at work, right? So that is a common question that I think people that work with talent management, they have to drive it up to the business and ask themselves, like, what does that mean for us? So usually my recommendation, it is on clarity and growth. So like you have to make sure that you know, what does your company stand for? Like, where are you guys going? Like, what are the benefits of people wanting to stay with you for the upcoming 6 months or 1 year? And, you know, understanding that it's not going to be perfect, that the authenticity of like, we're still going to have a couple of challenges, and going through those challenges will maybe give you a lot of different types of skill sets or experiences that will, you know, prolong your next challenge for something else. And then grow from the perspective of like, a lot of people, they tend to want to leave because they don't know, you know, like when they can get promoted, or like what's going to happen next, or, you know, they want to have a saying, they want to be heard. So for that, like I would always recommend having continuously dialogues, if it's different types of service or different types of coaching mechanisms or different types of spaces that people can speak up and say, I don't understand what's happening, or have you really thought about this, and things like that. But yeah. I just think my point is it's a reality. Sorry.
You're saying to work with it, like we do business plans, we do marketing plans, we do sales plans, we do all kind of different plans. But I think having a plan for every person at working with your company, like what are your goals looking 3 months, 1 year, 5 year, etc., and actually seeing that the person is adapting to that kind of skills and growing as a person. And when you are reaching 3 years, you have to shift the plan again and make it longer. Obviously, people still get bored and leave, but it's a way of having a clear plan and a clear journey. Where are you moving as a person, and where are you moving on in this company? I think that just gets the mindset, also putting the responsibility to the person. Like we have put this clear plan together. It's your responsibility to grow as well. We will give you these kind of resources to grow, but it's up to you in the end. And I think that's also a good way of just seeing that there is a future and there is a clear path.
You can't have them treading water. We need to always have them moving forward in one way or another. And at all times, it doesn't have to be moving forward. It doesn't have to be them vertically moving up in the chain. Sometimes it could be like horizontally as well, like internal mobility for the people to actually like, okay, I work in sales, but I want to transition over to marketing. How can you make that work and still keep the person who knows the organization, knows the culture, adds to the culture? If you can have a person who has worked in sales, add them the sales perspective to your marketing team, that could have great benefits as well. So like it's always about moving them forward in one direction. I think that's how you like, because that's the reality, but you always need to set a plan and you keep them, make them forward, moving forward in some regard.
How do you as an employer actually attract them, get them excited to join? Like, because I read somewhere that salary is back to number one. Like these people are really conscious about like earning a lot of money, but then again, like you have the making an impact part, and you want to have a good culture, like how do you attract these people?
So I think like for us, there's something with our brand, right? Like we talk to them directly as a consumer, right? Like as in marketing. So like a lot of people, they apply for us because they want to work for us already. And then like when they are in the recruitment process, what I stand for is quite a lot. It's the quality of the relationships. So they try to meet as many people as possible. And then they say things like, oh, I want to work with that person because that person is pretty cool or pretty interesting, or like I want to learn from that person, or, you know, like the details of relationship. So I think that's for us. And I mean, I'm pretty upfront into like, we are a startup, we are only 100 people, we're still building things. So I don't have the same budget or same capacity as another bigger organization. So that's what it is. Like, are you up for it? And then we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Have a culture that fits with the kind of people you want. Authenticity. You can't put lipstick on the pink or the pig, or you can't polish a turd. That needs to be important. I figure out the other saying that I was looking for in the past. Like you need to like have a clear path where they're doing. I think the money's this thing is of course an important thing, because I think people are now more aware. I think if you just look at figures in terms of investing, there's more people investing in the stock market and that kind of stuff now, which means people want to make more money so they can invest for the future, and that kind of is an important topic. But I think the money side of things is also a side effect of the coronavirus and the instability and that kind of stuff, which is also a saying. But I think culture, giving them a clear path, and just being transparent and honest and giving them next steps, I think that's the way to go. Giving them
the true story of where you're heading with your company. And I think it comes down to relationships. Like at the end of the day, it's a gut feeling if it's right or wrong. And I think that's important to be just true and honest.
Yeah.
That's some good last words, I think. I think we've managed to answer at least most questions. And thank you guys so much for asking such great questions. And thank you guys for replying to them. It's been like so fun to have you and to hear your thoughts and opinions. I hope the audience think the same. And yeah, thank you so much for joining. We're going to send out the recording in the follow-up email with the panelists' contact details and some additional resources and stuff. So yeah, check your inbox and you'll find that later on. Thanks so much, and hope to see you everyone again soon. Have a nice.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Bye.